Wycombe Wanderers announced their new manager, Peterborough United, pile the pressure on Darren Ferguson, and the relegation fight hots up. Welcome to the League One Lowdown. Welcome to the League One Lowdown podcast here on the Deck Network. I am Jamie Johnson, joined as always by Seb Jones. Seb, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I think I'm having some slight technical difficulties, but I am good. I'm still with you. I'm ready to chat all about League One. So, yeah, let's get to it.
Now, what the viewers and listeners don't know, this is take two at recording this podcast with Seb's sort of internet demons keeping us at bay, but we'll soldier on through and we're going to start with the big talking point and the big news of the weekend, as well as then going into 6 games in detail as usual. And the big news, of course, is Wycombe Wanderers and their new manager, Mike Dodds. He signed a contract until the summer of 2028. No great experience in terms of managerial jobs. This is his first full-time gig of a couple of interim spells at Sunderland, and he was most recently their assistant. Before we sort of go in, I guess, into more detail of what we think this will do for Wycombe for the rest of the season, what do we make to the appointment, Seb?
Yeah, the appointment is certainly an interesting one. You know, having never had a managerial position before, Wycombe as high as they are in the table, obviously took the time before replacing Bloomfield on a permanent basis. So it's interesting. Dodds obviously coming in, never having managed a club before, but having had success at Sunderland from a coaching position rather than from a managerial or a head coach position, sort of leading that group. So it's been involved. Certainly this season, Sunderland are flying in the Championship, and I'd imagine he's got some involvement in that as well. Obviously, he'll not admit that himself, but I imagine he'll be very much at the crucial element in terms of what they're building at Sunderland. It's interesting in terms of just some takeaways from the Wycombe statement that they released on the website, saying that Dodds has a track record in improving individual players and developing young talent was a key factor in our decision, as we believe this will be crucial to our long-term success. So basically, Wycombe have put it out there that not only do they see their academy as key to their future, but also see Dodds as a long-term appointment. Should they not achieve a promotion to the Championship at the end of this season, then he'll be the man to take them forward. It's not just one of those that sort of till the end of the season sort of thing. And also that they share the vision of building the club and in terms of the alignment with a commitment to the academy. So interesting in terms of that one. For a first managerial position, it's a bit tough, as I mentioned, considering Wycombe have had such a good start to the season. There's almost a lot of pressure on him to continue delivering that good run of form. So it's interesting to see how that will play out. But yeah, he's had credentials. He's managed Sunderland before on a temporary basis, so this is probably the next step for him. And it deserves a shot. But it's always interesting to see how these sort of managers that have never managed before on a permanent basis, see how they get on. So it's certainly one to keep an eye out over the weekend as well.
And it is sort of a trademark for Wycombe. I mean, more recently, Gareth Ainsworth, his first managerial job was at Wycombe. Obviously, it lasted a very long time, but it was his first proper job after being a caretaker at QPR. And Matt Bloomfield only had one job before getting the Wycombe post. And a bit further back than that, in the early 2000s, Tony Adams was given a first chance at Wycombe. And in the 90s, Martin O'Neill was his first proper big job, if you like. So there is those sort of expectations and in the past it has been done. So I don't think it's a shock that it is someone a bit outside of the box, but it comes with its risks, as it always does, and it can pay off, and the benefits are often sort of higher because that manager could go on to the next level, like Matt Bloomfield has done, going up to the Championship. Obviously, that comes with it financial benefits, and it becomes a pathway not only for players but for managers too. But there is the risk of Mike Dodds being unproven, and no one really knows what team he's sort of going to be set up at. At Sunderland, he had 3 spells as interim manager, 18 games, won 4 of them. And then obviously assistant most recently. He's 38, so a young manager too. And he comes into a league that has a few of these already. Michael Scrabal obviously springs to mind, one of the managers given his first proper job in League One. And it is a different pathway that managers are taking now.
Yeah, for sure, really. But, you mentioned that the proven success rate that Wycombe had in terms of these young managers coming through. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to see this at Wycombe. But as you said, sort of in terms of league-wide, it's a pattern, getting these young managers in and keeping them for a long time before they go on to manage leagues above. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see how Wycombe get on, because actually in the temporary, they've done okay in the past month. So they've probably drawn two more games than they would have liked. Too many games for their own personal liking. But actually, they've been pretty solid. They've still kept up there in terms of the automatic places. And things have done really well. So it'll be interesting to see, having had Dodds come in now, what change and how that will affect results and therefore league table rankings as well. But yeah, certainly sort of joining the trend, I guess, in terms of young managers to the League One rankings.
And you mentioned drop points and perhaps too many draws. Well, they drew at the weekend, 1-1 at Cambridge United, and they're now only 4 points clear of Wrexham, who are obviously in third. And that gap has begun to shrunk, and they're sort of being pulled into a fight with Birmingham coming away with it. They're only 4 points ahead of Wycombe, but a couple of games in hand that you expect them to pick up points from, and that really enlarges the gap. And then Wycombe become in a real tussle to keep their second spot in the table, and they drew to Northampton a fortnight ago, and they drew again to another team down the wrong end of the table, and that will be something they want to put right very quickly. And obviously bringing the new manager in, it gives that opportunity, doesn't it, to try and kick back onto a good run of form.
Yeah, the draw will really frustrate Wycombe, really, against a lowly Cambridge who, are fighting for their lives at the bottom. But equally, Wycombe would have seen this before as probably a pretty straightforward game. And they took the lead in the first half, but it was a red card for me that changed the game. Sonny Bradley, 64 minutes on the clock, got given his marching orders, straight red card, and 5 to minutes after that, Cambridge, I beg your pardon, brought on striker Detlef a Song, swapped him on for midfielder Jordan Cousins, and then they've got an extra striker on the pitch against 10 men. So they've already got that an extra focal top at the top end of the pitch, and in the end, to sort of prove dividend, because just a few minutes later, they got their equaliser. So the red card certainly changes the game for me. An experienced player like Sonny Bradley, I know we chatted about him a few weeks ago when he first joined, saying he'd provide experience and that sort of know-how in the back line, and he's let his side down, I think, and conceded 2 points that perhaps Wycombe would have thought were 3 for them to gain.
Yeah, obviously in on loan in January, the window not quite shut yet. By the time you listen to this, tonight is the deadline day stream, Monday the 3rd of February, and ourselves and the Fourth Tier Fever podcast are coming together to do a live stream on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, do join us along to sort of see all the happenings towards the last few hours of deadline day. But yeah, Sonny Bradley, as you mentioned, obviously one of the players coming in a lot earlier in the window. His red card opened the door, didn't it, to that late equaliser about 10 minutes on the clock with Josh Stokes getting it for Cambridge. And it looked, though, that Cambridge were on top in terms of the stats at the very least, and perhaps that was swayed by the fact that they were playing against 10 men for a decent chunk of the game. But they have only lost one of their last 4 games. They are down, obviously, still at the bottom, but they're all showing signs, and we'll get on to the other relegated sides, relegation zone sides as we go on. They're all kind of showing signs of life at the same time, and Cambridge are still in that mix and by no means being left behind.
Yeah, for Cambridge, I think they're proving a fight, and that's what you have to do when you're in the places that they're doing. You just have to pick up as many points as they can, and through fight and determination and grit, they just have to get what they can. You mentioned in terms of stats, 14 shots, 4 of them on target. I think that's really good going, really, for for Cambridge, and yes, part of that was probably playing into the hands from the red card for Wycombe, but nevertheless, they were given an opportunity, and they've managed to grab a point rather than conceding all three. So yeah, the bad to the bit, and just have to continue to do that. The form's improved slightly, but it could go even one step further if it sort of get a couple of wins on the bounce and then looking at a different picture, really. So yeah, they're doing a good job as they are. They just have to keep going and just keep sort of plugging at teams, and teams will hate to play them, and they've got to relish that and take advantage of teams perhaps not being the most happiest playing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, and it's Lincoln next for them on Saturday coming, so I'll be there for that, and that could prove an interesting game with how Lincoln have been playing of late. But a lot of teams are in that mix now. It's not just the 4 teams in the relegation zone. There were 2 or 3 above that who are getting dragged into a fight, and 2 of those played on Sunday. Bristol Rovers picking up a 3-1 win over Peterborough United, and this one is a really big result, it seems, at least to me, because Bristol Rovers leapfrog Peterborough with a game in hand, and they've got 2 big wins in their last 2 home games. Peterborough obviously here and Barnsley before that. They're starting to pick up wins when needed, aren't they, Seb? And it is allowing them to get a little bit of breathing space between themselves and the bottom 4 and just stay on top of the fight at the minute.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder for that result a few weeks back, Jamie. Bristol Rovers certainly, as you said, putting a nice run of form together, some good results that they managed to pick up, and actually pulled themselves 6 points away from the relegation point with a game in hand on the other side. So all of a sudden, it's actually looking really good for the Gas. So yeah, really good run of form, and that sort of topped off by the result on Sunday, to just get a result against the side around her and to leapfrog them as well as a result of the fixture. I think they'll be really happy with that. Wilson, Hutchinson and Sartoriu in amongst the goals. I think that'll really delight Bristol Rovers fans and just sort of ease concerns a little bit. Not that there were too concerned in terms of being dropped into there, but some of the sides along the bottom are picking up form, so then it does make the other sides worry a little bit, and sort of just eases some concerns. As for Peterborough, they've got to be really disappointed. We saw a double, I beg pardon, half-time substitution, and clearly nothing came of that because then they conceded 2 more in the second half. So yeah, same old story really. Just things aren't going well for them. The only thing I guess to cheer about was a late Ricky J. Jones goal in the 90th plus 1 minute. So yeah, concerns definitely for Darren Ferguson in terms of his position at Peterborough. But I guess the main talking point is that Bristol Rovers come out of this one with another victory and another sort of gap away from the relegation zone.
And as well, Bristol Rovers sort of gain a bit of ground on the relegation zone. Peterborough well and truly in that mix. They're 5 points clear of that dreaded dotted line, and they're level on points with Northampton, who we're going to talk about in the second half of the podcast. But it's only 1 win in 10 league games, and the pressure, I mentioned it at the top, the pressure is on Darren Ferguson. We spoke about it on our last review episode based off his comments post-match, sort of throwing his players under the bus a little bit, and that it's a really bad place to be at the minute, Peter, and they're really struggling. Obviously, that you can read whatever stat you like. There isn't a stat that says anything positive about Peterborough at the minute, and a defeat like this, it's huge, really. They're losing to those teams around them as much as losing to a Lincoln a couple of weeks ago is a bad result. Losing to teams in and around the same spot in the table is really quite devastating too, Seb.
Yeah, for sure. I think I just slightly went there, but I am back. Yeah, he'd be really devastated, Darren Ferguson. I'd be really upset, in terms of where Peterborough are, how they perform this season. If we take, yes, it's 5 points off the relegation places, but if we take a couple of sides in the relegation spot, we spoke there, about Bristol Rovers, they've come out of it, but also Burton, they occupy that last relegation spot, and they themselves are unbeaten in 5 games and 3 wins, 2 draws from that. So they themselves are picking up form, picking up momentum, and could quite easily sort of build that gap and just cut it down. And therefore, then Peterborough really are at risk of going down. So Dan Ferguson will certainly not be happy. We spoke about the pressure last week that he was facing, and that pressure rightly continues, really. He cannot really fathom this. He cannot excuse it. It's on him to sort this. He's got the deadline day. We've got the transfer window to try and bring some players in to sort it, but sometimes it's not necessarily the players that bring about change at club. It is a manager, and I'm not calling for Ferguson to go or anything like that. We know he's had success at club before, but yeah, it's just something that isn't quite right at Peterborough and hasn't been, and something needs to change. And whether that is a manager, then so be it. But one thing is for sure is they're in a very precarious position.
Yeah, and something has to give. Seems to be that sort of feeling around the place. It'd be interesting to see what does give, and if they manage to bring anything in before the end of the window, because they brought in those couple, 2 or 3 defenders towards the start of the window and had an instant impression with the clean sheet they kept. And since then, the wheels have sort of fell off that. They conceded 5 at Lincoln, 3 here against Bristol Rovers, and those goals are starting to leak, and they're not scoring enough either. We'll move across to Shrewsbury now, and a huge win for them against Mansfield Town, who are another one of the teams sort of struggling at the minute. We will get on to Mansfield, but Shrewsbury, a real battling performance. They went a goal down and a man down, and then came back to win 2-1. Quite incredible, this one, Seb.
Yeah, absolutely. It must have been some inspiring team talk, I think, from Gareth Ainsworth. As you mentioned, sort of a goal down after just a few minutes on the clock. It was 5 minutes when Evans opened the scoring for Mansfield, and then to go a man down as well, and Ciala sent off after 35. So went in 1-0 down. As I mentioned, some sort of inspiring team talk, motivational team talk, whatever you like, from Gareth Ainsworth, to come out within 9 minutes of the second half. John Marquis getting the equaliser, and then just under 10 minutes later, George Lloyd getting the winner. So despite all the odds going against them, really in the early stages of the game, did really well to come out of this one with 3 points. With a solid performance. As I said, the luck clearly not on their side, but we're able to get a really solid result. And we mentioned earlier in terms of the bottom clubs getting results, and Shrewsbury are no different to that. Now on 22 points, 7 places off safety. But if we just keep winning these sort of sides and keep pushing away, a similar thing to what we mentioned earlier with Bristol Rovers, they suddenly seem out of the relegation running. If Crawley can continue that, pick up a good run of results back to back, then there's no reason why they can't do that either.
Yeah, it's just runs of games, and they suddenly turn things around. I mean, they're 4 home games without defeat. Shrewsbury, 3 wins out of 4, and that's key, obviously, to just win on your home patch. I mean, we say it. I feel like we've said it a few times over recent weeks, and you hear it a lot. The cliche of your home ground a fortress, but it rings true. And if Shrewsbury can keep winning at home, that is something that they can use to propel them forward. And they're off the bottom of the table already, and they just need to keep going on that sort of vein. But the word I thought best summarised this was just sort of like warrior, or a battling performance, something like that. The video, I don't know if you saw it, it was doing the rounds on social media, of John Marquis like applauding the fans, doing sort of like the lap of honour, if you like, applauding the fans with just a trickle of blood coming down from what looked like his eye or his eyebrow. And I thought that sort of epitomised the game, really, that they just worked so hard and they battled and fought, and they just were so determined to get something out of the game, and they managed to do that. And it's just fantastic, really, to see a team like Shrewsbury struggling down the bottom end of the table, and it's that siege mentality that we're all in this together and just run through brick walls for your team and for your teammates and for your manager. And that seems to be where Shrewsbury are at the minute, and that is a recipe for success if it can be prolonged. But the opposite end of things, Mansfield, and Nigel Clough said before this game that the confidence was dwindling in his team. Well, it has dwindled even more, because they're 5 losses in a row now, and losing this one against who was at the time the bottom team of the division. It isn't looking great for Mansfield.
No, certainly not. Yeah, 5 defeats on the bounce is not something I think Nigel Clough will be happy with at all. 3 of those are actually against sides that are towards the bottom end of the table. Obviously, Shrewsbury before that losing to Cambridge and Crawley as well. So, sides that are fighting for their lives, but Mansfield they've just sort of fallen a victim really to sides that need points and evidently chasing performances and chasing 3 points on board. And yeah, Clough will not be happy with this at all, considering they were actually one of the front runners at the start and the top end of the table now in 14th, which I don't think it is bad, but consider all things how they started as well. Given how they got off in August, I think it will be slightly disappointing. Particularly of the run of form, the league table. Yeah, it's not looking great for Mansfield in terms of recent weeks and recent performances, and this one is no different to that as well. They actually had 11 men, but weren't able to come out of that with anything. I think that's remarkable, really. It's very rare that we do see, when there has been a red card in a game, the side with 11 men to not go on and win that one. And Mansfield had 11 men, they had the goal advantage, and yet they still came out this one with nothing. So it definitely leaves some questions. It's very rare that we do see that, as I mentioned. But Nigel Clough won't be happy, and there's just something to change and fast.
Exactly that. So we're going to head to a very short break, and then we'll come back to talk about 3 more games involving Birmingham, Huddersfield, and Stevenage. Welcome back then to the League One Lowdown. We're going to turn our attention to the top of the table. Myself, Jamie Johnson, joined by Seb Jones, and to the very top of the table with Birmingham City. 2-1 winners against Rotherham United. A brace from Jay Stansfield coming from 1-0 down. Sam Nombi got the first one, 44 minutes. It changed the half-time team talk, all of that sort of stuff. Well, the half-time team talk worked for Birmingham because they came out in the second half, got a couple, one from the penalty spot. Dominating on stats as expected, really. You thought if there were going to be any chance of Rotherham getting something out of this game, it was going to be vintage Steve Evans of a backs against the wall performance, catching Birmingham on the break and somehow winning, sort of against all odds, if you like. But Birmingham, they didn't allow that to happen, Seb.
No, clearly not, and they would have been very worried. We mentioned the Mansfield Shrewsbury game in terms of that half-time team talk for Shrewsbury, and clearly the Rotherham one had the opposite effect. That they got a goal very late in that first half, 44 minutes. As you mentioned, Nombe took the lead, and you would have thought, Rotherham just see out the lead, see out the goal, go back to South Yorkshire with the 3 points. But evidently, what was said at half-time. Clearly the opposite of holding a lead. Stansfield with 2, and the halftime team talk worked for Birmingham, worked for Rotherham. It's simply put. I think Rotherham have actually not been on the best of the run themselves. Losing to Burton last week as well, 4-2 as well, in pretty emphatic fashion. So they would have wanted the result. They would probably have been happy. Exactly, yeah. They would have wanted to go ahead, and they did exactly that at the right time, just a few minutes before the halftime whistle. So, on the outside, it looked promising for Rotherham, but then, Stansfield, he was brought in the summer to score goals, and he scored to this one to sort of turn the game on its head. Really, one of them was a penalty, and the other a good finish from him as well. So, strikers score goals and they win your games, and that's exactly what Jay Stansfield has done here when Rotherham seemed to be the most likely from the start.
Exactly that. Well, Rotherham are struggling for consistency overall. They're 7 points and 9 places off the playoffs, and that is becoming you wouldn't say a mountain, but it's becoming a steeper hill for Rotherham as the games go on, and the losses come in games like against Burton, as you mentioned a moment ago. So the signs at Rotherham aren't as positive as they were just a few weeks ago. They was on such a cracking run of form that firmly in the rearview mirror at the minute. So Steve Evans, though, obviously said, before we talk about Birmingham in more detail, they would just be hoping to get back on a good run because they managed to in and around Christmas, and they were putting wins together and nothing seems to have really happened, and suddenly the wheels are beginning to fall off again.
Yeah, that's absolutely that. They're just consistently inconsistent. I think is a good way to describe Rotherham. They're just sitting in sort of middle ground, really. We've got too much to catch in terms of the playoff run, and also they're too far of a distance to really worry about being dragged into the relegation fight. They're just sitting in that sort of middle ground area in terms of the league table. Yeah, Evans have as you mentioned, over the festive period, the form was looking great. That they were on a great results back to back. Winning lots of games, and something in the past few weeks has sort of turned against Rotherham. As we mentioned, pretty inconsistent, and I think that is their own biggest downfall. Really, not winning enough games to really properly challenge and push for that top six race, and ultimately, as you mentioned, sort of they're looking behind a little bit. It's proving too much of a task to chase the top six pack. But Steve Evans will fight as hard as he can. We know what he's like as a manager. He'll keep going until the end of the season. I was going to say till the fat lady sings, but that wasn't a reference to Steve Evans. But he will just keep going.
No one wants to hear Steve Evans sing.
Well, exactly that. No, we don't want to hear that at all. He'll just keep going, and he'll try his best, but being sort of more realistic, I think they're just stuck in this middle ground that they are currently in.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rotherham consistently inconsistent. Well, Birmingham are consistently consistent, and they're doing really well, obviously. They show no signs of slowing, is my main takeaway here. They're 4 points clear, as you mentioned earlier on, from Wycombe, and they're 8 points clear of third place Wrexham, with a couple of games in hand as well. So that gap can enlarge, and they're 17 games without defeat. Shrewsbury obviously beating them in November. They haven't lost since. So they're just keep going, and they've got an unbelievable squad. They've got a good manager. There's just no signs that Birmingham are going to throw this away.
Yeah, it's been a really solid season for Birmingham so far this season. I think we've seen sort of the stuff rumoured on social media this week saying if they continue the form they're on, they're going to reach over 100 points come the end of the season. Whether that, but I think there'll be some blip in there. But if they carry on sort of the projected points per game basis, then they're going to be hitting new heights. I think in terms of champions, they're absolutely good. Everything is going right for Birmingham this season. Everything is going their way. They've got good defence, good attack, and what more can you ask for? That's exactly what a good league gets you. League One, a lot of sides this year have been inconsistent and lacking quality. One thing Birmingham certainly is quality in all areas of the pitch, really, and they're proving an absolute force in League One with games in hand as well, as you mentioned. So there really is no stopping them, and going 1-0 down against a solid Steve Evans side. That's a true test of character, and for them to come back, I think will really impress Chris Davis and his side.
Well, another one of those teams up the top, though not as high as they were a few weeks ago, is Huddersfield. Another defeat for them, this one against Northampton Town by 3-2. We will talk about Northampton and the positives on their end, but Huddersfield, I guess, are the big story of this game because they're 3 losses in a row now, Huddersfield, and only have 1 win in their last 7, and they're slipping, and they're down to 5th. And they have to eventually kick out of this rut. I know they had a really bad start, a really bad spell sort of early on in the season, like where they lost a few games back to back, and then they came out of it and they're back into one. And it is just about getting out of it as soon as possible.
Absolutely, and to make matters worse, the new signing Joe Taylor is out injured as well for a few weeks, so not a good time to be a Huddersfield Town fan. That's for sure. Things look really good for them over the festive period, and sort of the back end of 2024 as well. But just recent weeks the standards have dropped really. And Michael Duffy is not really one that I would have thought that he would have sort of allowed this to happen. A couple of defeats on the trot, and then you would have thought he wouldn't let his side slip up. But to continue sort of getting these poor results is it's alarming, really. We can't not be concerned, really. I think they will get over this, in the short term, but looking at it in terms of a bigger picture, it's not really that good for Huddersfield. They set themselves good standard. Michael Duff sets his team good standards, and I know they've been busy in the transfer window. Get rid of Hellick, bringing in 2 new strikers. Letting all that sort of the team settle from that. It's always changed when you bring in new players, and mind 2 brand new players at the top end, and losing a key point in the defence position. So yeah, a few changes, but they can't be excused really for the poor results. And it does mean that they're sort of dropping down and away from these automatic places, down to 5th now. There's work to be done for Michael Duff's side if they really do want to push for the automatic spots, because the gaps are getting bigger and bigger, really. So, yeah, disappointing for sure, but we've got to credit Northampton in terms of their result. I'm not quite sure we saw this one coming at the start of it, but, yeah, full credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I mean, I put in my notes that it was a surprise win. They went 3-0 up as well. I mean, they were 2-0 up at half-time, scored very early on in the second, and you think then home and hosed, if you like, at home as well. But it didn't quite pan out as well as that because Huddersfield put on real late pressure, got the 2 back, but they held on, and that is the important thing in the end of the day. And it is a great victory, as you mentioned, Seb, for Northampton there. It's their first win in 4, and it just keeps their head above the parapet of the relegation zone and the relegation fight.
Yeah.
Level on points
it
with
absolutely
Peterborough.
does. Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry to disrupt a little bit earlier there, but he absolutely does. We mentioned about the sides that are sort of in the relegation scrap, really. Picking up some good results. Some of which you mentioned already, and Northampton. When things in the past few weeks have looked a bit bleak for them, they've run a really bad run of form. To get the victory is one thing. To get it in the manner that they did, I think, is another. And against the team that they did, I think it's great. It's amazing to see. For Kevin Nolan, he'll be really pleased. For the fans, they'll be really pleased. 3-0 up, I think, is absolutely exceptional. They'll be really annoyed with themselves that they've conceded 2.
They made it harder than it needed to be.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and so that will be the frustration, I think, But ultimately, they've got the 3 points against a good, solid side, and ended a pretty poor run of form. So, all things considered, it's a solid 3 points for Northampton, and it just adds to that pressure in terms of the bottom sides a little bit more. And yeah, I think a great performance, I think, for Northampton, and you mentioned there sort of a surprise win. I mentioned certainly one I did not see coming. If I was to name you a sort of nailed on winner in this one before this one, it's a good job we don't do the preview podcast. I can tell you that, Jamie. I would have said Huddersfield Town for this one, but yeah, Northampton coming out, surprising us all, and proving the shocks do happen in League One.
Mm-hmm. Well, another shock and another team who are in and around that mix. The final game we're going to talk about here, and a shock, perhaps not because of the result, but because of the manner of the result. Stevenage putting 4 past Exeter, who are one of those teams now who are only just above that relegation sort of situation, if you like. They're 5 without a win. We'll start with Exeter. They're 5 without a win, 7 points above the relegation zone. And as I say, sort of being dragged into that, for my money, they're in that now. 7 points is 3 games, isn't it? And if you lose a couple more, that becomes nothing, that sort of gap. Do you think realistically they're in that fight?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I agree with you. Yeah, sorry to be boring, but I do. Yeah, for that run of form, I think it's really bad. Northampton Town before they win against Huddersfield, no winning 4. For Exeter, it's worse. With 5 without a win, really. Yeah, a lot of teams down there are picking up momentum, are picking up some solid results, and yeah. We can't not look at teams like Exeter being pulled into into this one. Really, it's got to be a concern for Exeter. I think they absolutely are amongst the relegation scrap. Even though themselves, a few months, cast your mind a few months back, they were on a fine run of form. Winning games that you perhaps didn't expect them to, but things have not gone their way in the past few weeks. So, absolutely, I think they it's rightly really that we sort of see them as being pulled into it. A bit like some of the other clubs. It only takes a few results to be then back out of the scrap, I guess. So Exeter will want those results to come ASAP. But meanwhile, and for now, I think they are well and truly amongst it.
They scored in the 3rd minute, a penalty from McGuinness, and then it was 2 goals either side of half-time that saw Stevenage to a really convincing victory and 4 victories in a row in all competitions. And they've started scoring goals. I mean, I feel like you always talk about Stevenage, and you did this a couple of weeks ago when they played Barnsley, and just how turgid their football it can be at times, and there is nothing wrong with that. I do sort of hasten to add that every time because their football, as much as it can be boring to watch if you're not a Stevenage fan, it worked and it gets points. And at the end of the day, football is a results business. But they have 7 goals in their last 2 games. It is 7 of their 27 for the season has come in these last 2. And a win on the road at Wrexham, which was an incredible result against Wrexham, who that was their first defeat at home all season. And then following it up with 4 goals at home against Exeter. They're on a really superb sort of mini run at the minute, but they're looking really optimistic and up towards the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, you sort of joked about them scoring goals. Normally it's just a 1-0 or a 0-0. Yeah, again, good job I'm not on the preview podcast because they've proved us right off the park here. A 4-1 dominant display, scoring 4 at home. I know a couple of Stevenage fans who've just said, and rightly so, at times the football's not been great, but when your side's scoring 4 goals at home, I don't think you can argue too much with that one. Having gone 1-0 down in the first place as well, I think they've got to be buzzing with that one, really. They've got to be really happy. Yeah, amazing, really. I did have to, when I saw the score come, kept seeing the goals come through on that Saturday afternoon, I did have to, check, is this actually Stevenage based on sort of what we've seen in the past few weeks? I was pretty shocked. And for them to do it, having gone down 1-0 as well, I think that makes it all the more impressive. But yeah, massive performance for Stevenage. And yeah, massive result as well for Alex Revell's side, and I guess he sort of shrugs off some of the criticisms that perhaps they've been receiving. Like for myself, I hold my hands up to that one, but from elsewhere as well, they can score. It's the bottom line, and they can score more than one, which we didn't know was possible, but clearly is.
Well, it's put them on a positive goal difference as well these past couple. And the important bit, though, I mentioned when I passed over to you there, said that they're in the playoff push. Well, they're 4 points off the playoffs and have 1 game in hand on the majority of the teams above them, 2 games in hand on Bolton and Barnsley in terms of the teams they're chasing. They're really in the mix, a game in hand. I think they do have one of them is away at Birmingham, which, and automatically you add 3 points on for these games in hand. I don't think you can do that for a Birmingham game in hand. But even so, they're in that mix, aren't they? 4 or 5 points off, and a victory here or there, they can really put themselves back amongst it, the cat amongst the pigeons, if you like.
Yeah, off the league table, I think it's definitely achievable. Whether they'll do it, I don't think they can really. I just don't think they've got that consistency. I don't think they're scoring enough goals, which is ironic, having said that just after they scored 4 in 1 game. But I don't think they're scoring enough goals to be a true sort of dominant force. It definitely ruffle a few feathers if they did manage to get into that player spot come the end of the season. But yeah, I think it does look likely. It only takes a couple of results, and as you said, with the games in hand as well, it's all well and possible. I'm just not sure they are going to get a couple of good runs on the spin and scoring enough goals to get past. I think when they played Barnsley a few weeks ago, they won 3 games on the trot, all 1-0, and there's only so many teams you can win 1-0 against. I think there's too many sort of roadblocks in their way to prevent them properly challenging. But yes, nonetheless, to bring it back, it does only take a few games, and the games in hand, they've got to look at them, apart from the Birmingham game, as favourable, really.
Yeah, definitely that. Well, elsewhere, you mentioned Barnsley briefly there. It was a goalless draw for them against Burton Albion. I mean, it's 5 games unbeaten now for Burton, 11 points from the last 15 available. Go on, I have to give you a word in on the Barnsley game. So.
Yeah, well, in fairness, I bet I said to you this off air. I bet Sky regretting their 12:30 choice of kick-off. He looked a good one. In fairness, Barnsley not in the great form. Burton on a good run of games coming into this one. I think two teams just cancelled each other out. Even wasn't necessarily a ball draw as such. Both teams had good chances. Burton will be happy to make it 5 games unbeaten. I think Barnsley will be happy to not. To end the run of 3 defeats on the spin. So both sides happy with the point and the clean sheet as well. Joe Gowsey making his debut for Barnsley in between the sticks. So he'll be impressed with a clean sheet on debut. So, entertaining 0-0 as far as entertaining 0-0 can go.
Exactly. There was a 1-0 win for Stockport County away at Leyton Orient. A battle of playoff chasers there, and it's 4 wins in a row for Stockport, while Leyton Orient's incredible run of 11 league games without defeat, well, that has come to an end. So we'll see how they bounce back. I'm sure Sam will have plenty to say on that on the preview podcast, so we can skim along to another 1-0 win, that Reading against Bolton Wanderers. The first match since the new man came in at Bolton, and it's a loss to Reading. Not exactly ideal.
No, not at all. Certainly not the start that he would have wanted. But Reading are a good side. Results quite haven't gone their way in the past few weeks, but certainly a side that on the day can be really strong, and especially at home as well. So, Schumacher in at Bolton now, I think is a solid option. And I think it's always tough going into that first game in charge. You're never quite sure what to expect, working with new players for the first time, new systems, etc. So I think it will take a couple of times before we see his, tactics proper implemented to the ground. And of course, we've got the January window as well. So he might have been bringing a couple of additions before the close of play on Monday night as well.
He's got to act quick. Stephen Schumacher, obviously, in at Bolton. It was a 1-1 draw between Wigan Athletic and Lincoln City. James Collins missed a penalty and scored the rebound late on to secure a point for the Imps there. And Blackpool 2-2 against Charlton Athletic, coming from 2-0 down to keep their unbeaten start to 2025 alive. And then the final game is one we were going to talk about in more detail until the Peterborough Bristol Rovers game took focus, and we spoke about that one, of course, earlier on. But it was Wrexham and their 2-1 win at Crawley Town. This we'll have a word on it before we head off for the end of the podcast. That it's a win for me of a promotion chasing team. It's the sort of win that the teams who are going to get promoted pick up, because Crawley Town scored an equaliser in the 90th minute, and you think you've thrown away a couple of points, you're going to finish 1-1, and then in the 95th minute, Elliot Lee pops up with the winner, much needed as well after a couple of losses and a Birmingham draw in the last 3 for Wrexham.
Yeah, massive, I think, for Wrexham, really. I think Crawley would have been really happy with the point at home against Wrexham, and it looked to be that way, grabbing a last-minute equaliser, but then for Wrexham to fight back again and get that late-minute winner, 90+5, as you mentioned, Elliot Lee, it absolutely does, a side that just keeps on going, keeps battling, no matter what gets thrown in their way. And yeah, you're right, they've gone from... going home with 3 points to them going home with 1 point to then battling hard to then going home with 3 points again. So it absolutely, with that determination, it just shows that their ruthlessness, really, that they are too prepared to fight right up until the end of the whistle, and that's what they did, and they managed to go home with 3 points, which is harsh probably on Crawley, because a point would have been fair, and a point would have been a great result for them, and just helped ease their situation a little bit. But not to be. Wrexham continued to continue their great run of form.
Exactly that. Well, put themselves back on a good run of form, which is always important for those teams. They keep pace up at the top with the promotion pushes. So thank you for joining us here on the review episode of the League One Lowdown. Myself and Seb will be back same time, same place next week. But in the meantime, as well as obviously the preview podcast from Callum and Sam, we have a special deadline day live stream on YouTube and on social media platforms as well. And we'll bring you all the big transfer news across the last few hours of the window, from League One, from League Two, and from further afield as well. Myself, Seb, and Sam will be doing the first stint before we pass over to our League Two colleagues to see you to the end of the January/February transfer window. So do join us for that on YouTube, and thank you all for watching and for listening here to the League One Lowdown.